Welcome to Expedition Self on OMTimes Radio with lifelong learner, entrepreneur, and creator of the worlds of Expedition Self, Sam Parrotto. Sam shares 4 decades of studying, guiding, and teaching how to go inside so we can build an incredibly powerful, dynamic, and validating relationship with the self. Expedition Self is laced with stellar, unexpected insights about what it means to be human. Listen now and ignite your self-development process with Sam Parrotto.
Well, hello and welcome. I hope life is bringing the very best growth experiences you could possibly imagine for yourself. I'm Sam Parrotto, and you are listening to Expedition Self. Today, we're talking about growing up too fast and adulting and what it means to mature. But just a little bit about our show, or my show, is that, we always talk about ways to go inside or why it's important to go inside and how to think about it. And, the very idea that much of our self-information is stored inside of this vast, unconsciousness that we don't have obvious ready access to, it just fascinates me, and it always has. And to think that the best exploration of our lives, the most adventure we can have, can be done inside our own psyches is mind-blowing. And to add to that, every single moment when you spend living your life, it creates this constant interactive dynamic between the outside activities and what you're doing, right, as you move around life, and your inside conversation. So, I believe that the more adept you become at handling that back and forth and going inside and going out into the world and then coming back to see what happened in your inner garden, the more you'll feel a general sense of personal power to create life, one that's full of potent, satisfying, and replenishing experiences that help you grow as a person. I'm invested in that, and I'm assuming if you're listening that someplace that's what you're wanting too. So this is a call-in show, and it is always more interesting when people call in, because then it's not just my conversation that's going on, it's people adding their own dimension to it. So the number where you can call in is 202-570-7057. Okay. Well, so today's show, it's about growing up, and wowee, this is a big topic. It's one that we could look at from the developmental psychologist perspective, or one that you could consider from be a productive member of society, how to do that. But I'm going to just share a lot of what I've seen and heard through my own work with others, and of course, my own process as I've worked to grow up also, or to be in the growing up process. So, I gave you the phone number. I just want to make sure I cover my notes here. And when you call in, feel free that even if I'm on a particular subject, that you just share kind of wherever you are or whatever's important. It doesn't have to fit into what I'm saying. It doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to make sense. It's just you really stepping in and participating with me as I engage in this conversation. So I always end in a poem. Sometimes I have poems throughout. On this particular day, I thought it would get us in the right frame of mind to get started. And I found a poem called Daisy Bear. And when I read it, it dropped me into my childhood. And I thought, oh, this is an awesome place to get started. So it's by Carrie Love. It's not short, so hang tight here. Daisy Bear. You were always there to protect me through the dark and cold of night. I would hold you close beside me and squeeze you in so close, so tight. We would pretend we were in another place so full and free of fun, where no one could ever hurt us and life had just begun. I would tell you all my secrets about the happenings of the day. I would often whisper in your ear, please take this pain away. Although you couldn't stop the life or path that I was led, I would sit with you for hours, just alone on my bed. And each time that we heard a footstep made, or maybe two, a door slide open, I would just reach out for you. You would take me to that place so free and full of fun, and the pain wouldn't hurt. And again, it was done. So now that I am older and the fears have faded too, I can look around my life and it doesn't seem so true. You're still here to protect me with an eye missing or two. My favorite little bear, we made it through because of you. I don't know. I really loved that. Just the idea that when we're little, we have these experiences that are scary for us, and that we can actually connect with some part that kind of gets us through it. So that leads me to the question, which is, what does it mean to grow up too fast? Well, the bottom line is that you're thrown into dealing with emotional, intellectual, and physical, spiritual experiences before you're developmentally ready to handle it. And then the psyche is traumatized because it creates a level of unsafety for the self, right? And when this happens, things inside, they start kind of collapsing in on each other. Thoughts and feelings, they all start kind of globbing together. And then we have to disconnect emotionally as a way to cope. And we go unconscious of what's happening for us. So if you think about it, even though it could be very intense, there's also small versions of this, but you could basically see it as trying to handle just too much. So if you think of it like this, first, picture yourself in a quiet room. The lights are low, and you can hear the clock ticking in the background, or the rustling of your pants when you shift your weight. You can see things in this room, but they're not too bright. You're able to notice yourself because on a sensory level, you can process what's happening in the room and what's inside. You can feel yourself breathe. You can hear yourself think, and there's no outside stimulus to draw you away from paying attention. It's all manageable, the taking in of your entire space. And then picture that someone walks in and begins to talk and stomp on the floor. And they raise the lights just a bit brighter. And then 2 more people walk in talking loudly. In an argument, completely unaware of their surroundings. And they turn the lights on at full brightness. And then someone walks in listening to their favorite rap song on a boombox, and they don't have any earplugs in. And then a huge thunder and lightning storm happens outside, making it dicey to even ponder leaving the room. So what's happening with you with each added person? Well, you become less and less able to process what's actually happening inside. You start having to protect yourself from the overwhelming nature of the sound and the light, and you're absorbing the emotion in the space until you just have to kind of, like, you think to yourself, get the heck out of Dodge. And of course, getting out of Dodge doesn't look like a viable choice because of the thunder, lightning storm outside. So when that happens, your psyche, it makes a decision about what it can handle and what it can't. And so it basically shuts down the being with the feelings and the sensations that are happening all around. In that moment, the mind doesn't even try to make sense of it at that point, because the only thing that's happening is it's trying to survive. Okay, so that's what it's like, right, when we're asked to grow up too fast. We'll keep talking a little bit about what that is or when that happens, but that's the connection, the interior experience I'd like you to be referencing as we talk through this. So this is one of the ways we actually start operating out of survival mode in life, right? Where we're thrust into overstimulating, overwhelming situations as we're growing up. And just as a way to deal with them, we start relating to these situations in a way that has us try to manage them by avoidance or aggression, right? And survival mode doesn't give us a lot of choice. So this is just a little plug about how that gets put in play, right? So does this make sense to you, that we get in these overwhelming situations and then our psyche has to manage how we're going to get through it? Because it's likely that this has happened to you, and I know it's happened to me, and it's very possible that it's happened a bunch of times. And that each time it happened, you were asked to handle it, and you were likely completely, you were unprepared, really, to really stay conscious while doing it. So that's the first and most important thing I want to say. When we are thrust into situations that require us to be more capable of handling this mature material, we are putting our future capacity to be conscious at risk. And it's likely that if you're, as you're listening to what I'm talking about, you're connecting with your own endeavors, your own activities to become more conscious, to get in touch with your deeper self, to open up more aspects of who you are as you've gone through life. So I want to take a little side trip here because a lot of people think that self-development, self-help and therapy and transformational work and spiritual exploration, that it's a fix because something is actually wrong with you. But it truly isn't. It's the reopening of our consciousness because it closed down little by little along the way. And it's a learning of skills to be conscious that we might have never learned, or it's an unlearning of patterning that got set in motion because of the too much, too early quality of our life. So, and consciousness, it translates to the brightness that we can handle, the taking risk in life that we choose with a whole self and a capacity, to be more fully in relationship with each and every single moment, making it possible for us to use this lifetime to its maximum, optimum experience. So this is a big deal to understand. Consciousness got lost as you grew up, and you now have an opportunity to reclaim it. So, all right, let's get back to the nature of these overwhelming situations that have to do with like growing up too fast, because I want to describe a couple of these. The first happens just as part of being in a family from the inside, right? And then the second happens because you're part of life and how life goes. So here's the first. So when an adult in your midst doesn't have ownership or really a connection and a deep relationship with their own emotional feelings, needs, and wants, and they make others responsible for them, it will create an overload situation where you, the child, assumes that responsibility. So maybe you've heard that word parentified. Well, it's basically when a child starts to be the one who has to make adult decisions or deal with adult problems and stresses. And of course, the challenge with that is that the adult is having adult feelings that are super complex, layered, unworked, and you as a child haven't reached a point to understand, process, or even connect with the intensity that comes with them. So I like to describe this as you're doing someone else's growing up for them in that moment. You're handling their job in life for them. And this can get very extreme because when adults don't own their feelings, they can become passive, emotionally inaccessible, unwilling to communicate, or not care about your needs if you don't respond in a way that they think you should. And of course, this can just be this way all the time, and that's going to have some impact on you too, right? So they can become loud or angry and violent. They can actually direct their issues at you as the child, so it gets very globby in here. It's growing up. It doesn't happen in a balanced way at a reasonable pace, and the disproportionate overload caused by someone else's inability to have grown up and remain conscious, it now causes your growing up, right, to be impacted. So who would want to hang around for that, right? Who wouldn't shut down or do anything they could to cope with those adult feelings that are overwhelming coming at them? When I was a little girl, I talk about my grandmother a lot, but and my grandmother I felt very connected to and very loved. And she had this long hallway in her house, and we were in the living area. And she asked me to do something that I didn't want to do, whatever it was. Likely it was gardening, because I don't like to work out in the garden. And that was her thing. She always wanted to stick me in the garden, have me dig up worms and slugs, which I also didn't like doing. Anyway, the next thing I know, she's crying. And she says to me, as she's kind of walking down the hall in a fast, intense way away from me, she's saying, "You don't love me. You don't love me. You would do what I want you to do if you loved me." Now, you might be over there thinking, are you kidding? Who says that? But it's a really great example of what I'm describing is like she was not really owning those feelings she had. And now I was dealing with something that I didn't really understand, and we didn't talk about it. And I can tell you in that moment, I just shut down. I had like my sense of feeling was not accessible to me. And that's just a small example of what we're really talking about. And it happens all the time. So the more we can get in touch with, oh, wow, there I was as a child. I probably was about 6. And that I can see that something was going on where that adult, in that case, wasn't like handling her own feelings. And then they ended up on my lap. That was an important re-looking, for myself. So the problem is that when we're in those moments, we don't understand what's happening when it's happening. So we start to make up stories and explanations about what's going on. And that usually takes us to finding something to explain it that has to do with us, what we did, who we are, what's wrong with us, and why, right? So we try to take the explanation into something where we have some sense of power, because the experience actually causes us to feel powerless in some way. So in my case, right, I went to, wow, if I would have done what I was supposed to do, if I would have responded, if I was obedient, she wouldn't have felt those things. See, it's someone else's feelings, someone else is acting these out. We have no power to change that for them, not really. So as a way to get some semblance of power, we create these explanations that have us as the source or reason for what's happening. So I think this is a good place to pause. We're headed to break. I want to give you the phone number again. So it's a great time to call and kind of share maybe a story like this for you or something you're seeing. The number is 202-570-7057.
A conscious lifestyle for a mindful life. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
OMTimes magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organisation, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. Connect at omtimes.com. OMTimes, creating a more conscious lifestyle.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
COVID-19, brought to you by CDC and the Ad Council.
If you're feeling increasingly lonely right now, you're not alone. It's totally normal. Even though we may not be able to get together in person, connecting virtually with friends and family still gives you a chance to interact with people and may help raise your spirits. Join a virtual book club, set up group text chats, or online video coffee breaks with coworkers.
Find more self-care and coping tips at coping-19.org.
Well, hello, I'm Sam Parrotto. You're listening to Expedition Self, and we are talking about growing up too fast and what it looks like to adult and to mature. Before I go in back to what we were talking about, I did want to mention this month we're doing a really cool thing on Facebook. Is we're doing weekly giveaways to celebrate that we've reached 5,000, and each Friday I go live. Where you could actually see my face and not just my voice, hear my voice, and give cool swag, towels and journals and these little pouches I really love. So if you would like to participate in that giveaway, it's for the entire month of July and 2021, and you can register at samparrotto.com. You can also follow this radio show there as well. And what we do is we give you a prompt on the day of the radio show. So you actually have a really easy way to get to the listening part of it. You just click on that link and off you go. So if you'd like to do that, you can go to samparrotto.com. All right. So we were talking a little bit about what happens when adults don't really do their own work around their inner world. And we're talking about how that you end up dealing with someone else's feelings and someone else is acting these out. And what that does is it has you feel like you have no power to change that for them. Not really, right? So as a way to get a sense of power, which we're not even really conscious of, we create these explanations that have us as the source, right? Or the reason for what's happening. So that's the takeaway for us, is that these ideas about, like, I could think I'm too much, or I'm insensitive, or I'm unresponsive, or I don't like emotions, so I don't want to feel, right? Because we'd rather have that than no sense of control and power. And because we're dealing with more than we can handle, we have to go somewhere, right? It has to go somewhere. So this is really a commonplace occurrence, right? And it ranges in extremes from a little to a lot. And I think the more you can sort out the degree to which this has happened in your world, inside of your family culture, the more you're going to be able to go back and claim that consciousness, that got lost. So, okay. So now let's talk about the second one that causes us to grow up too fast. So that comes in the form of life, money, and survival issues facing the family, poverty, unexpected loss, health issues, death, divorce, right? Abrupt and sudden change, right? These kinds of things also have us grow up too fast. So these real life things are rife with so many feelings, and the people involved may not have the skills to handle a lot of life, let alone handle life when these extreme experiences are at play. And so if you think about what I just described above, when I said you're doing someone else's growing up for them, in this scenario, you're having to handle the overflow of what someone else can't handle. Complex feelings made more complex by the circumstances. So in the worst of scenarios, if you're living with adults that don't know how to be responsible for their own feelings already, and you add this kind of real life stuff on top of it, consider this a very difficult mountain of feel too much too soon kind of life experience. In the best of situations where you have adults that do have some relationship with owning and connecting with their inner experience, these kinds of life stressors will cause even them to go into overload. And when this happens, a lot of people, if they have never sought help for the overload, will have no access to work with this disruption. And they'll try to, tough mutter their way through it, believing that they should be able to handle it, that they're strong enough, or they see no way to get help for themselves. And when this happens, in essence, the adult who was managing before isn't now. And we're thrust into this scenario where we're having to handle what they can't. And we're doing this before we really are able to. Are you able to connect with these kinds of events from your life? I don't know many people that get through the growing up to a certain age, to 25, without dealing with something like this in life, and watching the people around them and their family members, their siblings and their parents deal with it as well. And you add to it that we've got all of our own fears and our insecurities are being triggered at that time while we're sharing the space with adults who are in overwhelm. I feel like as a society, we're still not sensitive enough to what this actually does to us and what the toll that it actually takes. And that the more we can get in touch with that, the more we're going to get healthier and healthier as a society. But this scenario, it really does connect with that room I described at the beginning, when the two people come in, and then the next, and the boombox, and then the thunder and the lightning storm that made it impossible to leave. Because when life has dished out these very real crises, you are dealing with the people around you and how they handle it, and and you're dealing with your own inner stuff. And you may or may not have what you need to be able to talk through it, understand it, connect with it, and really give yourself room with it. And so think about that. It's like just on a thermometer. It's like the temperature goes up, right? So I want to mention that it's really hard to sort out whose is whose. And I think this is a big part of going inside, is going back into these experiences that you had. It's important to getting conscious because you have to go and you have to retrieve the stories and those conclusions you made up as a way to get some semblance of power and control and to cope over a bunch that wasn't controllable. Oh, look at this. We have a caller, Diane. Wow, she's back again. Diane, what have you got to say about growing up too fast?
Well, I'm thinking that all of a sudden I had a revelation in listening to you, because I don't think I've ever thought about the fact that I had to grow up too fast. But one of the things that I was able to connect with was the fact that every year I moved to a different school. And it always appeared that my mother had it all together. And yet when I would have an issue, it would be like, it's okay, don't worry about it, it's okay. But I really felt like I was carrying, I don't know it now. I didn't know it then, but I think I know it now, that I was carrying a lot of the strife and the struggle and the adult things when I was in 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have to say, the idea that you would get sensitivity around the magnitude of that experience is really, warms my heart. But the other part of that is that it also demonstrates how it sounds like, not that I know this, but it sounds like your mother didn't get in touch with her thoughts and feelings around those moves. And so she couldn't make room then for you to do the same.
Right. Well,
Right?
It seemed like everything was okay. So I needed to kind of get with the program,
Yeah. Yeah. And right in that space, that's where you get to see that, your psyche would have had to shut down in some way or another, the consciousness, in order to get with the program, right?
Right. Anyway, I've never thought about it that way. It was just, I just grew up, and I certainly was dealing with a lot of things that my girlfriends and my classmates weren't. But I didn't stay around for a full year in most cases when I was going to school. So I didn't even have the opportunity to go back and say, did you go through what I went through?
Yeah.
So anyway, that it was quite interesting that all of a sudden I started thinking about that.
Well, it's a lot to handle that you describe. My heart felt the idea when you said I didn't even have anybody to go back and say, did you feel what I felt? So thank you for sharing that with us. I really appreciate it.
You are welcome. Thank you.
All right. Have a great day.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. Thank you, Diane. Appreciate you visiting. You come often. I always love what you share and your insights. So let me just go back to where I was. And what I was saying was that it's hard when we do go back to work on this to recreate more consciousness. It's very hard to sort out whose is whose, right? That when you go back to these experiences you had to get more conscious, because you have to go and retrieve these stories and the conclusions you made up, that it's so important that you go slow in here, because it's just not so easy to sort that out. So remember, we're talking about this growing up too fast through the lens of too fast. So it's likely there were lots of moments when there was a break, when you didn't have to disconnect from your consciousness as a way to handle things, or you didn't have to self-protect, right, as a way to cope, where childhood was fun, where you got to experience, all the adventure and the unexpected parts of being, in life at that age. I do think there is a relationship to the degree to which adults didn't stay in ownership about their emotions, the degree to which the crises in life occurred in your life, and the amount of time you had to decompress or process through it all, even if you didn't have words or a knowing about how to do that. See, the thing about working through these two grow up too fast scenarios is that learning how to talk about feelings and thoughts in a non-judgmental environment and being able to tap into what's going on inside are the two most important skills to staying conscious. But oftentimes, they're not the skills you have when it's going on. And this is why you're left, with the idea of when you grow up, you got to grow up, right? To go back and deal with what didn't get dealt with then. So that brings me to the next phase of this conversation, which is this idea of adulting. So adulting, the term was coined by an American writer named Kelly Williams Brown in the second half of 2010 around social media. And I do think it's a great term to describe the activity of intentional growing up. So some of the byproducts that come out of growing up too fast are that when it's time to be grown up, subconsciously we're really not prepared. We're resistant. And we try to get the needs met that we didn't get met now as we're going through a time when we're supposed to be the adult. So to me, I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn here or a little to the left. Adulting has to do with learning how to be responsible for our own feelings. And it has to do with becoming self-sufficient, developing self-trust, becoming competent in some way and going out into the world and taking risk and healing our past in such a way that we are now free to create a future that is less about reacting to the growing up too fast and instead a reflection of being able to act on our own behalf, of having our own power. So at the core of this idea of adulting, the way I see it, is we begin to move towards becoming 100% responsible for meeting our own needs, wants, and dreams. So there's something I want to say about this place of adulting. If you don't open up yourself emotionally, being independent, simply getting independent will not deliver the full ride. And I want to tell you why. So when the unconsciousness occurred, it was because you couldn't process the whole of what was happening inside of you. And the only way to cope was to shut down in some way. So what goes with that is a healthy, robust relationship with your emotional interior. Now, there's other parts to your interior, but the emotional part is like the bridge, right, between the intellect and the rest of the self. So even though you might have joined the Peace Corps for a year and traveled all over the world or moved across country to go to college, without the opening up of the emotional layer, adulting is by its nature limited. And so this is the way it is for most people. It takes a long time to realize this. Life and more crises and more events and more loss, more relationship experience. It happens. And then you're now in a place where you might choose to stay conscious or work through the present feelings in a way that you couldn't when you were young and you were dealing with all this adult stuff. So this is why it's so important to notice when we feel emotions in the present and to trace and source them back to moments when you likely felt them but stuffed them, right? And, I talked about this on the show around emotions. It's just so, so important. So have you noticed what I'm describing as you engage on this journey? That these new experiences help you to keep going back and reclaiming and healing and opening up your conscious mind. Oh, I meant your unconscious mind. Whoops. All right. So one of the best ways to connect the present with the past is to notice, this is a little hack, the emotional intensity in the present situations, like if it's high or seemingly kind of disproportionate, because there's a pretty good chance, if that's true, that there's a spot in the past that you went unconscious, where you might have been asked to grow up too fast, and it's surfacing now because of whatever scenario you're in the middle of. So again, you had a parent who didn't own their emotional state of being. You went through a divorce. It resulted in you feeling like there was something you could or should have done to keep the family together. And now you have a way of being that's all about mediating and holding relationships together. And what gets lost is that you feel like you're the only one. You're the only one trying to make sure everybody gets along. Right? You hold it all together or keep feeling like it's on you to do that, while others in the space maybe are aloof or detached or don't seem to care. Right? Growing up too fast means you're going to do some of the growing up as an adult because it didn't get done as a child. And seeing the places where you went unconscious and reclaiming them is the best way to not only become an adult, but to then move into maturity as a human being. So, okay, I've got the whole next piece that we've been talking about, which is adulting. I'd love to know what you think about that idea, and the idea that you are going to do the growing up in adulting that you didn't do when you were young because you were doing other people's growing up. And the phone number when you can call when we come back from break is 202-570-7057. So I look forward to picking up our conversation then.
The best of holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
If I could be you,
and you could be me,
for just 1 hour,
if you could find a way
to get inside
each other's mind,
walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
We've all felt left out. And for some, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Walk a mile in my shoes.
Well, we're back. I am Sam Parrotto, and you are listening to Expedition Self. I do love that commercial, the walk a mile in my shoes. I feel like if we could really do that, oh my gosh, the world would look very different. But anyway, back to our subject. We're talking about growing up too fast, and in the last little segment, we talked about adulting and what's really involved in that adulting. So, I'm not sure exactly how to say this in a way that'll really land, but if you want to truly be free to be yourself, then going back and seeing where you grew up too fast is one of the keys. We're like re-experiencing the moments that overwhelmed your psyche and skills. It is doable, and using the present to connect to your blind spots or your unconsciousness, it's a totally empowering way to cause your here and now to be much more engaged and dynamic and useful, right, to your development as a person. So adulting activities are ideal to help you grow up. Have you been in moments in life as an adult when you just knew you weren't grown up enough to truly step towards a situation with your whole self and handle it in a way that made life more, right? That really embraced the full spectrum of emotions without needing to run or hide? That's the question. Have you been in those moments? Because that's what we're going for this kind of whole self-engagement that no matter how big the boulder is that's rolling towards you, that it's about deep strength where you don't lose a part of yourself. It's about being able, to experience loss and fear and disappointment without using it to form lessons that just lessen, L-E-S-S-E, and the scope of your life. So I'm trying to paint a picture of what it looks like to be a whole self in your adult form and what you're going for. Not because it's positive or it's going to look good in society, but because it brings with it a sense of deep and profound living in each moment through each day. And when we can do that, then the joy and the happiness, it far exceeds our expectations, and we don't have to work so hard. So here's some examples of conscious adulting and what they might look like. Ready? Get ready. You're going to be shocked at this one. Crying, sleeping, being lazy, as long as you can without undermining your life. Taking such good care of your body that you eat and sleep and exercise and tend to yourself in an extraordinary way. Spending a block of time alone with no TV and simply being with what's going on inside. Certainly meditation fits in this, right? Going away for a weekend with a group of friends and committing to sharing each and every thought and feeling that comes up with them in a loving and safe environment. Right? You get to kind of recreate the shared moment of life. Creating a go-to guide or teacher or mentor or therapist who can help shed light on those stories you created to explain away the growing up too fast scenarios in relationships. Or learning a new anything. Starting from scratch, having no idea, figuring out what you need to be safe in doing it, finding people who are experts in it, and then allowing them to support you in the learning, where you really remove all of your defenses and come up against your sense of inadequacy, right? Recreating, here's another one, recreating an experience from your before, but recreating it in a way that you would have wanted it to go. Being in a conversation with people that were there and maybe having that go differently. Just a couple more. Really thinking about how you can support yourself financially, emotionally, physically, and then experimenting with intentional projects to help you put those things in place. And the last one is go back into your life and build a timeline of the situations and circumstances where you likely went unconscious or dealt with too much. I think I have a show coming up where I'm going to actually talk about how to build a timeline and how to do it in a fun way that's creative. So it's a good one to, reconnect with. So now I want to move into this idea of being mature. So when we take on adulting, if we do it in a way that produces this forward evolution for us, right? Because we're going to do the growing up that we prematurely did in life, right? We're going to get to a point where our needs start to feel less intensely hungry. And those needs to feel essential or important, those 5 core needs I talk about, or to feel valuable or seen, or the needs to feel secure and safe, they begin to go through a kind of metamorphosis because we've actually become the capable parent to ourselves. We've gotten to a place where the inner child is getting heard, and the various aspects of the self are included and considered in the decision making. You stop being so judgmental and critical of yourself. I shouldn't say stop, but that becomes less because you see how life is really one big learning, and you're able to understand more about all the players on your stage. And you've come to understand much more about what you're good at, what you're not. And the stuff that you're not good at is just awaiting your attention to learn, rather than being a statement of your self-image or your self-worth. And worrying about what others think of your path or how you got here, it becomes less important. And as a result of all of this, you're able to be more human with yourself and on behalf of others. So it doesn't mean that you don't still have your fears or your needs. It just means that you can now see beyond them. They don't take you over and give you no choice about how you might respond. It doesn't mean that we still don't have blind spots or unconsciousness or more healing and transformation to do. It does mean that we welcome the opportunity to see more about ourselves, to go inside and really look and learn, rather than feeling inadequate or beating up on ourselves about how we got here. See, a maturity, it allows for more in any moment. So this conversation is about growing up too fast and then adulting and then knowing what maturity can look like. But the most freeing thing to any of us is realizing this key fact. And it has to do with accepting all that we're not. See, all of these statements that I keep making about what adulting can look like or what you'll be able to be when you're mature, the true freedom comes in being completely, utterly okay with not being there and being aware of it. See, this is what gets set up, right? When we grow up too fast, we're always feeling like we have to be something more than we are. We feel as if where we are isn't far enough along, and we have lots of opinions about how we're needing to behave in a mature and appropriate way. Remember, there was too much that you were dealing with when you were growing up too fast. So now you're not enough now, too. And the more we can actually be with that, without a lot of weight and burden about it, we get freer. So it's one thing to understand how it went for us, right? To plan projects and learning experience to help us become adults, and even to have a vision of what maturity can offer us when we don't fight to get our needs met all of the time. But the most important thing to take away from this conversation is the acceptance of knowing that we are not there. I hope this isn't confusing for you, because I think what happens is a lot of times when we get into growth and development, we start setting up this ideals, this standard, right? When we talk about, I grew up too fast and now I'm going to get somewhere and I'm going to get healthy. But actually, it's the consciousness of not being somewhere that's the point of it all. Because that's what sets us up to keep learning, to keep understanding, to gain wisdom, and to experience that wild sensation of being free to be who we are and trusting that. See, each and every moment of your life, when you grew up too fast, set you up with a personally created human schoolroom that offered a level of tension, right? This tension, like the stretch, an opportunity to know you. And with each moment in each day, when you know you better, then it means you bring that to the people you love and the people who love you. See, without that tension that happened in whatever the truth is of your life, whatever the moments are, who all the people were that played out in your world, there was this level of tension that brought you to this very moment where you're in the conversation with me. And it's meaningful, right? Because it produces this huge opportunity to keep looking and seeing. So accepting that we're not there has us actually appreciate every single difficult, upside down, overwhelming, get me out of Dodge moment for exactly what it was. An experience to experience you and your feelings and your thoughts and your journey and where you're headed and your raison d'etre for being here and the whys and the hows of you. And we don't give this to ourselves easily. And when we're trying to heal our growing up too fast, it brings with it this kind of wrong making or a judgmental quality because the feelings that were associated with it didn't feel good. It's an easy jump. Those feelings when we were growing up too fast, we probably didn't like. We shut down about them. We actually felt powerless. Now we're here, right? Now we're going to give ourselves a hard time some more instead of really embracing the idea of this tension that comes from growing up too fast, adulting, and then moving into being mature. So when we're really committed to being fully in life, then we want to endeavor to hold the space to create a foundational and a universal acceptance that every single gosh darn minute has something to do with this wisdom you're gaining. And you can go back over and over each moment to keep finding new ways to support yourself in taking risk, to expanding your life, to reinventing how you live each day, and to transforming your ideas and beliefs about how life should go and how people should be. So, to circle all the way around, it would be nice if we could interact with children in such a way that we didn't cause them to grow up too early, right? Where we gave them skills, right? It would be super nice if we could give the children in our lives the self-awareness skills and the words to talk through the crises and the events that ask them to handle life situations before they're really ready. This is a worthy goal. It would be awesome for you to go back and look at how you were thrust into growing up too early, too, to further your healing and capacity to be responsible for all that's happened and is happening in your life right now. It's helpful to understand all the ways you can continue to help yourself grow up, to be able to handle more of the reality of what life is, so you can get stronger and more capable of living in each day and taking on the vision, right? The vision that you have for yourself and your family and the community and the world, right? It's really important that you notice when you have emotional reactions in the present and that you take the time to tie them to the past, to reclaim those parts of yourself that are hidden, from your awareness. And understanding that with each of these days and years, when you are committed to your own learning and your own healing, you'll be able to operate in a way that is less needy, less reactive, less judgmental, and more open to taking real risk. But the most important thing about all of it is recognizing that no matter where we think we are or how far we've come, that we can also embrace where we aren't, without anything other than that's interesting. Because when we do this, we're more likely to notice more about our inner world, to be more accepting of all things. And this translates to so many more choices. So I hope today's conversation has taken you back to your childhood, really had you look and think about where are the places that you grew up too fast, either because the adults around you didn't actually handle their adultness in a way that didn't overflow to you, or where life actually disrupted your world in such a way that it really called to you to have to show up before you were quite ready. And then think about adulting in terms of what do you really give yourself room to do that has to do with developing independence and reclaiming thoughts and feelings and getting more conscious. And finally, that place of understanding what being mature can look like, but actually really allowing yourself to not be there. And so inside in the conversation I love, which is going inside, to me this is just another conversation to help you think about it from a different angle, from a different lens, from a different dimension. So, okay, I have a kind of long poem to end with. And since we didn't have any more callers, I had a short one too that I could choose from, but we're going to do the long one. So this poem is by Edgar A. Guest. And now I don't know the title of it. So I'm going to read it anyway, but I don't know what it's called. So it's something about youth. And it's kind of long, so this is a good time if you're settle in, because we're going to use the last 3 minutes for this. If I had youth, I'd bid the world to try me. I'd answer every challenge to my will. Though mountains stood in silence to defy me, I'd try to make them subject to my skill. I'd keep my dreams and follow where they led me. I'd glory in the hazards which abound. I'd eat the simple fare privations fed me, and gladly make my couch upon the ground. If I had youth, I'd ask no odds of distance, nor wish to tread the known and level ways. I'd want to meet and master strong resistance, and in a worthwhile struggle spend my days. I'd seek the task which calls for full endeavor, and I'd feel the thrill of battle in my veins. I'd bear my burden gallantly and never desert the hills to walk on common plains. If I had youth, no thought of failure lurking beyond tomorrow's dawn should fright my soul. Let failure strike, it still should find me working with faith that I should someday reach my goal. It's dice with danger, and glory in it. I'd make high stakes the purpose of my throw. I'd risk for much, and should I fail to win it, I would not even whimper at the blow. If I had youth, no chains of fear should bind me. I'd brave the heights which older men must shun. I'd leave the well-worn lanes of life behind me and seek to do what men have never done. Rich prizes wait for those who do not waver. The world needs people to battle for the truth. It calls each hour for stronger hearts and braver. This is the age for those who still have youth. I hope you love that. I feel like it really describes what we're all capable of as we reclaim our childhood and move into being the kinds of powerful adults that make the world a better place. Thank you so much for spending this hour with me. Have an awesome week.